From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin in Honduras, where health workers and teachers are promising to press on with their general strike, despite the violence used by the police on Thursday. Our correspondent had exclusive images of a policeman kicking a human rights defender in Tegucigalpa. The man was wearing a vest, identifying him as part of the ACI human rights organization. The Human Rights Commissioner in Honduras has condemned the violence during the strike against the privatization of health and education. He called on both sides to avoid irreparable damages.
Thousands took to the streets in Tegucigalpa. They spread out across the capital and even reached the airport.
Today the people are in the streets to demand just one thing: the resignation of this narco-dictator and the whole gang of criminals who rule us. We are going to stay in the streets until we get a government of the people.
The repression followed swiftly, pushing protesters into other neighborhoods. It went on for hours.
It's outrageous that the government is repressing us like this. We just want these decrees to be stopped, but they won't listen to us, and this is the only way we can make ourselves heard.
Instead of increasing the budget and buying medicines to deal with the crisis, which is what their emergency decree says, they bought in high-quality tear gas and they're firing it at a peaceful demonstration.
The turnout was huge. Many of the protesters held their ground against the police as they used dozens of tear-gassed grenades.
This is an extraordinary show of strength by the people of Honduras, and it shows the weakness of the government. And that means they are in no position to negotiate a solution.
For the protesters, this use of force shows that the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez only survives with the support of the United States and the armed forces.
It's the United States that is keeping this government in place, along with the military high command. For the US, Juan Orlando is just a piece in their game of chess in the region, so that they can use our territory.
The protests took place in all of the main cities in Honduras, and everywhere there was repression, leaving many injured and considerable damage. In spite of the violence used by the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez, the doctors and teachers say they will go ahead with their general strike against the president's refusal to revoke the decrees that will privatize healthcare and education.
Over 1 million people took to the streets in Brazil on Thursday to protest against President Jair Bolsonaro's proposed cuts to education. There were demonstrations in cities across the country. Many of them went on late into the night, like this one in Rio de Janeiro. The government is planning to reduce funding for public education by 30% and is pushing for Congress to pass the cuts in the next 10 days.
In 208 cities across Brazil, over 1 million people took to the streets to protest far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's $1.8 billion cuts to the public education system. The protests, called the Education Tsunami, were organized by students and teacher unions.
The students are out on the streets of Brazil today to say no to Bolsonaro's education cuts. We're not stupid, we're not troublemakers. All we want is quality education.
It was the second national education strike to take place this month. After the first one brought 1 million people to the streets, President Bolsonaro called the protesters idiots. Brazil has one of the world's largest foreign reserves, so these cuts are not necessary for financial purposes, and many people feel that they're a first step towards privatization.
A nation without education is a nation without a future. I am a public school teacher. I studied at public schools, got my master's degree at a public university. I was an affirmative action student. and I know how important education is to people.
The protests were organized nationwide through democratic assemblies of student and teacher unions. Meanwhile, hundreds of other labor unions joined the protests in solidarity with their cause.
We from the CUT understand that the government has taken away workers' rights. Now they are taking away the rights of workers in the education sector. Things have deteriorated a lot. So unity between the workers and the education sector is very important for our country right now.
For the first time in years, the Brazilian labor unions and students have united, and the next step will be a general strike marked for June 14th. Brian Mir, Telesur, São Paulo.
The Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says he's confident that the U.S. president will rectify his actions and reverse his threat to impose 5% tariffs on all Mexican goods entering the U.S. López Obrador said Mexico does not deserve this treatment. President Donald Trump said he was taking the measure because Mexico wasn't doing enough to curb immigration across the border. He said the tariffs will come into effect on June 10 and will increase by a further 5% every month until, quote, the illegal immigration problem is remedied. Earlier, López Obrador published a letter in which he wrote, President Trump, social problems are not resolved with taxes or measures. How can you turn from one day to the next the country of fraternity with immigrants of the world into a ghetto, a closed space, where they are stigmatized, mistreated, persecuted, and expelled? Mexico's Vice Foreign Minister also condemned the threat of tariffs.
It's disastrous, of course. If this trade is carried out, it would be grave, very serious, extremely serious.
Sería gravísima.
But yes, I trust in that is something that is not destined to happen, because it would be extremely serious. If this is put in place, in my opinion, we must respond vigorously.
Responder en una forma enérgica.
The Mexican Navy is taking part in a multinational military exercise in the Caribbean Sea from May 30 to June 20th. The initiative, known as Trade Winds, is promoted by the United States Southern Command.
On April 25th, the Mexican Senate gave the approval for around 130 Navy components to leave the territory to participate in a military exercise in the Caribbean, initiated by the United States Southern Command.
It's a great opportunity for participating nations to create a multinational force that is prepared to act in cases of crisis in the Caribbean region. The project also seeks to generate and strengthen ties in matters of mutual cooperation, such as humanitarian assistance, security, and maritime protection.
As indicated by the third fraction of Article 76 of the Mexican Constitution, the Senate must supervise any action that the government initiates involving foreign policy.
The Navy cadets have participated in various exercises. What the Senate does, by procedure, is authorize their exit and participation in the collaborative exercises, which I reiterate is a different type of training, for a period of time set by the Caribbean. The Navy has no further involvement and cannot interfere in any other issues.
Mexican troops have participated in this type of military training since 2014. The 2019 edition, which begins on May 30th on the coasts of the Dominican Republic, takes place as the U.S. government continues putting pressure on the Venezuelan government led by President Nicolas Maduro.
It is a region with a lot of oil, and the energy industry is vital to Venezuela's economy. The country also has a geographical advantage, yet the U.S. acts as though it's its own territory.
Geopolitical expert Ana Esther Cicela points to the number of people that will be deployed from Mexico. This in spite of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's clear position of non-intervention in the internal affairs of other nations.
Mexico is acting within the context of trying to open dialogue for the situation in Venezuela. And still, the country participates in a military exercise that does not seek to surround Venezuela, because similar exercises take place on a regular basis. However, it does somehow monitor Venezuela's surrounding.
President Lopez Obrador has said on numerous occasions that he rejects the military cooperation promoted by the U.S. He could even end the Merida Initiative, a military agreement signed in 2008 by former Presidents Felipe Calderón and former U.S. President George W. Bush.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The head of the Latin American Foundation of Human Rights has criticized the negative impact of the U.S. economic blockade against the people of Venezuela.
For the past 3 years, Funda Latin has denounced the effects of the coercive unilateral measures against Venezuelans. All of them affect the health and the daily life of people in Venezuela. We also know that the Venezuelan state has been implementing a number of social programs with incomes from PDVSA and Citgo.
The president of Funda Latin also said that due to the blockade, children who were in need of a bone marrow transplant had their treatment denied.
We know there are 30 patients, of which 12 are children, who were chosen to travel in January to Italy for a bone marrow transplant. Unfortunately, 4 of them died. We at Funda Latin send our condolences to their relatives and ask that situations like these don't happen again. Their relatives are asking us to seek solutions and alternatives to their situation.
Violent protests have broken out in Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince. Demonstrators came out to protest against increasing inflation and the government's many corruption scandals. Opposition lawmakers reportedly tossed furniture out of meeting rooms to protest against President Jovenel Moïse. Large protests took place in February 2019, asking the president to step down. A United Nations expert says Julian Assange has suffered intense psychological torture comparable to some of the gravest cases from interrogation prisons around the world. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, also accused the US, the UK and Sweden of consistently failing to protect Assange's human rights. In early May, the UN human rights expert met with Assange in Belmarsh prison and assessed his psychological and mental state along with 2 medical specialists. Melzer says he found Assange to be agitated, under severe stress and unable to stand trial.
To be very outspoken, I don't believe that he would be, or I wouldn't expect him to be subjected to physical torture in terms of waterboarding or any kind of physical, these so-called enhanced interrogation methods. I would much more expect him to be subjected to prolonged solitary confinement, to very harsh detention conditions, and to a psychological environment which will break him eventually. If he should have committed any offense, by all means he should answer for that. But when we see at how these proceedings have been conducted by the Swedish authorities in concerted cooperation with the British authorities and also indications for cooperation with the United States and now with Ecuador, it is very hard to escape the impression that here we're not speaking of prosecution, but of persecution. That means that judicial power and institutions and proceedings are being deliberately abused for ulterior motives.
Colombia's Attorney General's office has finally released FARC leader Jesus Santrich. This comes a day after Colombia's Supreme Court ordered that he be freed and announced they will be taking over the investigation of his case. According to the court, Santrich has immunity thanks to his position as a representative in the country's lower house of Congress. Earlier this month, Santrich was released from prison only to be arrested minutes later due to the alleged discovery of new evidence linking him to drug trafficking in the U.S. And Telesur spoke exclusively with Santrich after his release.
Bien, yo no tuve en la cárcel un rumor.
I wasn't in jail because of a rumor. I have enough relationships to know with certainty that they were going to call a state of emergency and that my extradition would be by ministerial decree. They had a plane in Catam ready to proceed. Fortunately, that plan was aborted because of the pressure that the establishment felt. I think there's always going to be danger because of the submission to the orders of the United States State Department. That means that we will have to unite our wills in the face of the hate supported by the strong economic interests that impede social justice in Colombia and on this continent.
In other news, ancient burial towers have been returned to a community in Bolivia after a process of restoration. The set of 11 funeral towers were built by the Aymara people between the 10th and the 15th century. They were restored by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. The towers were handed over to the communities during a ceremony at the Condor Amaya archaeological site in the south of La Paz. Indigenous communities in Chile are condemning police repression and the handling of a government consultation. They oppose the modification of a law that regulates their land.
Indigenous communities in Chile are voicing their dissatisfaction with the inquiry called by the government, led by President Sebastián Piñera. The government wants to modify the law that protects the little land that they own from the trade market.
We want to make it clear that we totally reject the modification of the Indigenous Law number 19953 because this change will provide the opportunity for them to continue taking our lands away.
The government says it is an update to the indigenous law, but a brief analysis of the topics discussed shows the law's true intent, which includes allowing the lands to be rented, modifying the protection of owners' titles, and making more difficult the requirements to create indigenous communities.
This is the right-wing's aspiration. Every 40-50 years they try to modify the law to get our territories. The previous attempt was during the 1979 dictatorship of former President Augusto Pinochet. He imposed a 2568 decree which parceled off the communities, and he declared that those who did not live in the area were not Mapuche.
Convention 169 of the International Labour Organization forces the government to hold consultations with indigenous communities. This is why the president has to go through this process before making any decisions. But when the proposals are rejected, the Chilean Shield motto, by reason or force, is applied. In San Bernardo City, in the suburbs of the capital, the indigenous consultation was not accepted. The government refused to sign the act, and police force quickly came into action.
In order for us to leave, we need to have this document signed. However, they sent the guards to prevent us from going to the second floor. Then police were called.
11 Mapuche people were arrested and a minor was injured. Police took the minor and injured to the hospital. For indigenous communities in Chile, saying no to consultations is very risky. Indigenous communities in the Loquimé town in the south of the country also said no.
This is an arbitrary process that we have not asked for and does not real and effective solutions for our people.
Police evicted the communities that gathered at the building. Meanwhile, a meeting was held in the same building with indigenous communities that said yes to the consultation.
This is the way the government led by Sebastián Piñera holds dialogue.
According to the Chilean state, the inquiry in Lonquimay town was a success, a move that could repeat itself in the rest of the communities that await the process.
A 16th-century-old church in Mexico has come to the surface after waters receded from a dam in Oaxaca state. The low water levels brought on by a drought due to 2 years of little rain made the church emerge from the water. Local residents blame the event on climate change. We have more stories coming up, so stay with us.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. In the United States, the governor of Louisiana has signed a highly restrictive abortion law that bans the procedure after a heartbeat is detected. The law was adopted on Wednesday and could prohibit abortions as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy. It contemplates exceptions, among them the cases in which the life of the mother is in danger. 79 state legislators voted for the bill, while 23 voted against. The bill was signed by Governor John Bel Edwards on Thursday, making Louisiana the 6th state to change abortion laws for the year to date. In this, Louisiana joins Ohio, Mississippi, Georgia, Kentucky, and North Dakota. Narendra Modi has been sworn in for a second term as India's Prime Minister following his overwhelming election victory. He took the oath of office along with his cabinet ministers. More than 8,000 guests, including heads of several neighboring countries and even Bollywood stars, attended the ceremony in Delhi. Ahead of his inauguration, Modi visited the memorials of Mahatma Gandhi and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, where he paid respect to the late leaders.
India.
Former Catalan President Carles Puigdemont, recently elected member of the European Parliament, has announced plans to take legal steps after being denied access to the chamber. Along with the country's governing PSOE, Spanish right-wing parties wrote to the EU's Parliament's president, demanding action to prevent the entry of newly elected deputies who support Catalan independence. The European Parliament has since suspended the credentials of all Spanish MEPs elected to the chamber. Puigdemont said the move was discrimination and a violation of the fundamental rights of European citizens. Now let's turn to sports. West Indies has hammered Pakistan by 7 wickets to win match 2 of the Cricket World Cup. O'Shane Thomas and Andre Russell starred as West Indies bowled out Pakistan for 105 and raced to victory with 21.4 overs to spare. Man of the match, O'Shane Thomas took 4 wickets, including that of Pakistan's Wahab Riaz. The Windies' big win means they overtake England at the top of the standings. And prompted by a strong opening spell from Jofra Archer, England began their Cricket World Cup campaign on Thursday with a comfortable 104-run win against South Africa. Archer, playing only his 4th one-day international, took 327 and hit Hashim Amla on the helmet to force him to temporarily leave the field. But not to be outdone, England skippers Eoin Morgan and Ben Stokes picked up the pace to bring their side back into the contest. And it was a huge wicket for England as Liam Plunkett sent back Quinton de Kock for 68. Cuba continues developing traditional forms of medicine, which are considered to be an effective alternative to be used by health professionals. One particular pharmacy in the island is at the forefront of this specialty. Let's take a look.
University professor Antonio Castro is a customer of Flora, my grandmother's pharmacy, a very particular pharmacy specializing in natural and traditional medicine. He assures us that these products are very beneficial for people's health.
I usually buy products for my digestion. In this case, we also use many other natural products sold here. They help with different types of ailments.
Flora, my grandmother's pharmacy, is a developing project located in Punta Brava, about 25 kilometers to the west of Havana. Here, the traditional way of preparing herbs and infusions are preserved, but scientific certifications are also carried out to avoid mistakes in the use and the concentration of products.
One package is enough to prepare a liter of tea or natural infusion. It is good to cure a cold. It contains oregano, rosemary, flower of mahawa, and copal, which is used as a expectorant.
This pharmacy produces an array of products to control hypertension, diabetes, inflammatory, circulatory, and respiratory issues, as well as herbs for cooking.
These products have active ingredients and often have a pleasant taste. Patients can consume the medicine several times a day without causing and discomfort. So we do a great tasting mix for the patient.
This project is led by Dr. Rodolfo Arincibia. For him, natural and traditional medicine is not an alternative. It is a primary option among a myriad of products to treat health issues.
We have to bring this back as a main option. A doctor needs to have the choice between chemical and natural products for patients with acute or chronic health problems, or for older patients and children, or for cases where chemicals may bring further issues.
Cuba has a long history of developing natural and traditional medicine. According to reports from the Ministry of Health, in 2018, the island achieved the best result in its history within its field by producing 78 million bottles, all of natural medicine.
And with that, we end our news brief, but you can find these and more stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. And for our viewers in Africa, you can find us on Starsat channel 461 in South Africa, and for Nigeria, it's 539. You can join us on social media as well. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.